The biting Alaskan wind howled a mournful song across the endless expanse of white, a dirge that had labored for decades over the frozen tomb of Flight AE-17. Vanished on a Christmas Eve alight with festive promise, the passenger plane became a ghost story, a chilling whisper in aviation lore. Families clung to impossible hopes that slowly froze over with each passing year, the vibrant lives aboard seemingly extinguished without a trace. Then, after what felt like an eternity of icy silence, a glint of metal, a tear in the pristine snow blanket, revealed the impossible. The aircraft, eerily preserved. But it wasn't just a wreck. It was a time capsule. Within its frozen heart lay a story of unimaginable hardship, unexpected grace, and a bond so profound it defied all understanding, a testament to the quiet compassion that can bloom even in the most desolate of landscapes, a story whispered between human souls and wild hearts, forever etched in ice and memory. This tale, discovered in the fragile pages of a flight attendant's diary, speaks of survival against impossible odds, but more than that, it whispers of an inexplicable kindness, a silent pact made in the shadow of death, that transcended species and echoed through generations. If you enjoy the video, like the video and subscribe to the channel. The final boarding call for Flight AE-17 had echoed through the bustling terminal, a sound interwoven with the cheerful cacophony of Christmas carols and last-minute holiday greetings. Laughter and the rustle of gift wrap filled the air as passengers settled into their seats, their minds already at their destinations, with loved ones, warm fires, and festive feasts. Sarah, a flight attendant with a kind smile and eyes that held a gentle warmth, moved through the cabin, her own thoughts drifting to the family she would join after this last flight before the holidays. She helped a young mother, Clara, settle her wide-eyed 5-year-old daughter, Lily, who clutched a new teddy bear, its fur the color of cinnamon. An elderly gentleman, Mr. Henderson, adjusted his spectacles, a book of poetry resting on his lap, a quiet anticipation on his face. The mood was light, buoyant with the spirit of the season. The ascent was smooth, the city lights below twinkling like a fallen constellation. Then, somewhere over the remote, unforgiving Alaskan wilderness, the festive spirit shattered. A sudden, violent shudder ripped through the aircraft, followed by a deafening roar that wasn't the engines. Lights flickered, then plunged the cabin into a terrifying, disorienting darkness, punctuated by screams and the sickening lurch of a world turned upside down. Sarah, trained for emergencies, fought against the G-forces, her voice trying to cut through the panic. But it was a losing battle against the raw, primal fear that gripped everyone. The cold was the next sensation. An instant, brutal, invasive cold that bit through clothing and chilled to the bone. Then, the cataclysmic impact, a symphony of tearing metal, shattering glass, and the final terrible silence that descended like a shroud, broken only by the whistling wind and the pained moans of the few who still drew breath. When consciousness, or something resembling it, flickered back for Sarah, she was met with an overwhelming tableau of devastation. The fuselage was a mangled ruin, torn open to the elements, snow already drifting through the jagged gashes. The air was thick with the smell of jet fuel, and something else, something metallic and terrifying. Pain, sharp and insistent, throbbed in her arm and head. Around her, the scene was one of utter chaos and heart-breaking stillness. Slowly, painstakingly, she moved, her training kicking in despite the shock and agony. She found Clara, dazed but alive, shielding Lily, who, miraculously, seemed to have only minor bruises, though her small face was pale with terror, her cinnamon bear clutched tightly. Mr. Henderson was groaning softly, his leg trapped at an unnatural angle. A handful of others stirred, their faces etched with disbelief and dawning horror. They were alive, but stranded, in the heart of an icy, indifferent wilderness, the festive promise of Christmas Eve now a frozen, bitter mockery. The first few hours were a blur of tending to the injured with what little remained of the first aid kits, the cold seeping deeper, stealing warmth and hope with equal cruelty. The vast, silent whiteness outside the fractured shell of the plane was both beautiful and terrifying, a pristine cage. Decades melted into the Alaskan ice, the story of Flight AE-17 fading from headlines into the quiet archives of unsolved aviation mysteries. Then a routine geological survey, a team of researchers mapping the shifting glaciers, spotted it. An anomaly, a shape that didn't belong to the natural landscape. The news sent a ripple through the quiet circles of those who still remembered. As they carefully excavated the site, the level of preservation was astounding, the cold having acted as a perfect, unforgiving embalmer. Inside the wreckage, amidst the frozen remnants of lives cut short, they found a small, leather-bound diary. Its pages were stiff, the ink faded in places, but legible. It belonged to Sarah, the flight attendant. And as the first entry was deciphered, a new, incredible chapter of the Flight AE-17 tragedy began to unfold, one that spoke not just of loss, but of an astonishing, almost mythical encounter. December 24th, Sarah's neat script began, the ink remarkably clear despite the years. Chaos, unbelievable. The noise, the cold. It's like a nightmare I can't wake from. So many. Gone. I don't know how many. Maybe a dozen. Clara and Lily are alive. Lily is so brave, quieter than I'd expect. Mr. Henderson's leg is bad. The radio is dead. We're alone. The snow is relentless. It's Christmas Eve. God help us. The early entries painted a grim picture of their desperate fight for survival. The dwindling emergency rations, the gnawing hunger, the oppressive, soul-crushing cold that seeped into their bones, no matter how they huddled together within the broken fuselage, using torn seat cushions and blankets for scant insulation. Sarah wrote of the small fires they managed to build from scavenged debris, precious flames that fought a losing battle against the Arctic chill, their flickering light a small beacon against the overwhelming darkness. She chronicled the injuries, the growing despair, the prayers whispered into the frozen air. Hope for rescue, initially a burning ember, began to fade with each passing day, each silent, star-filled night that brought no sound of approaching aircraft. Then, about a week into their ordeal, a new element entered Sarah's narrative. December 31st, something watching us, eyes in the dusk. Saw them again this morning. Bobcats. A female, and what look like two young ones, almost grown. They keep their distance, just observe. Are they waiting for us to weaken? The fear is a cold knot in my stomach, another predator in this desolate land. The initial fear was palpable in her writing. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat, every rustle in the sparse, frozen scrubland outside their makeshift shelter sent hearts pounding. The survivors were already on edge, weakened by hunger and exposure. The presence of wild cats, known for their stealth and hunting prowess, added another layer of terror to their existence. They had so little strength left to defend themselves. Lily, however, seemed less afraid, more curious. She would sit by a crack in the fuselage, her gaze fixed on the spot where the bobcats had last been seen, her cinnamon bear her silent confidant. The diary entry for January 3rd marked a shift, a hesitant note of disbelief replacing the stark fear. The most extraordinary thing. Woke to find a rabbit, lying on the snow, not 10 feet from the opening we use, perfectly still, untouched. None of us saw or heard anything. Mr. Henderson thinks the bobcat, the mother, she left it. I can't believe it. Why would she? We cooked it, the first real meat in days. The taste. I wept, not just from hunger, but from something else. A fragile, impossible hope. Sarah's skepticism was understandable. It could have been a coincidence, a kill abandoned for reasons unknown. But then it happened again. A few days later, a ptarmigan, plump and white, lay in almost the exact same spot. And then again. The offerings were never made in sight of the humans. They would simply appear, silent gifts in the snow, sustenance delivered by an unseen, wild benefactor. January 10th. Sarah wrote, her handwriting gaining a slightly stronger, more awed quality. It's them, the bobcats. There's no other explanation. They leave us food, small animals, always fresh. They are keeping us alive. The mother, we've started calling her Aurora, for the lights we see sometimes in the night sky. Her kits, we call them Frost and Shadow. They still keep their distance, but the way Aurora watches us, it's not with predatory hunger. It's something else. A knowing, an understanding. It sounds mad, but the food is real. The warmth it gives us is real. The dynamic between the stranded humans and the wild animals began to transform from one of fear and observation into a silent, cautious coexistence, a fragile pact forged in the crucible of shared hardship. The survivors, still weak, would leave out small tokens. A piece of shiny metal from the wreckage, a bright button from a coat. Not as payment, for what could they offer creatures of the wild? But as a gesture, a primitive acknowledgement of the incredible, life-sustaining charity they were receiving. These tokens always vanished. Sarah's diary became a testament to this strange, evolving relationship. January 20th. The nights are the hardest. The cold is a living thing, trying to steal our breath. But sometimes, when the wind stills, I see Aurora. She sits on a snowdrift just beyond the furthest reach of our small firelight, a silhouette against the stars. Like a sentinel. I swear, one night I heard a wolf pack howling, closer than usual. And then, a series of sharp, guttural snarls from beyond our camp. Different, fiercer. The wolf cries faded into the distance. In the morning, there were large paw prints, not bobcat, leading away, and Aurora was there, watching, her gaze steady. Did she protect us? It feels like a fairy tale, a wild, impossible story whispered by the wind. Little Lily, too, seemed to develop her own silent communication. She would leave her cinnamon bear near the opening of their shelter, and sometimes Sarah swore she saw one of the younger bobcats, perhaps Frost, approach cautiously when no one was looking, sniffing curiously at the toy, before retreating. Lily would then retrieve it, her face solemn, but with a flicker of something like understanding in her young eyes. She never tried to touch them, never made loud noises. There was an innate respect, a childlike acceptance of these wild guardians. The entries continued, chronicling the slow passage of time, the brutal beauty of the Alaskan wilderness, and the unwavering, almost ritualistic support from their feline protectors. February 5th. Mr. Henderson's leg is not healing well, despite our efforts. He's weaker, but he watches for Aurora, too. He says she has kind eyes. For a wild creature, it's an odd thing to say, but looking at her calm, steady gaze, I almost understand. She seems to carry an ancient wisdom, an empathy that transcends species. Or perhaps we are just desperate, projecting our hopes onto her. February 15th. We lost Mrs. Albright today. The cold, the weakness, it was too much. We buried her as best we could, under the snow, marked by stones. Aurora and her kits watched from a distance. There was no menace, only a quiet stillness. Later, a snowshoe hare was left for us. It felt like a condolence. How can that be? How can these wild creatures show such compassion? Sarah's reflections grew more profound, grappling with the inexplicable nature of their situation. The harsh reality of their dwindling numbers, the constant hunger that gnawed even with the bobcat's offerings, the ever-present threat of the cold, was starkly contrasted with these acts of interspecies kindness. She wrote of the interconnectedness of all living things, a theme she'd perhaps read about, but never truly felt until now, in this frozen, desperate place. The bobcats were not just providing food, they were providing a sliver of warmth in the icy despair, a reason to keep fighting, a testament to something good and wild and inexplicably benevolent in a world that had otherwise shown them its harshest face. The final entries in Sarah's diary were penned with a visibly weakening hand, the ink growing fainter, the lines less steady. March 1st. Spring feels a lifetime away. We are so tired. Lily still looks for the kittens. Clara hums to her old lullabies. Aurora, she still comes. Her presence is a comfort, a silent promise in this vast emptiness. I don't know if rescue will ever come, but we are not entirely alone. March 10th. So cold. The fire is small. Mr. Henderson. He's peaceful now. We said goodbye. Clara is strong. Lily asked if Mr. Henderson would see the stars better now. I think perhaps he will. Her last legible entry was short, almost a whisper on the page. March 15th. Thank you. Aurora, Frost, Shadow. Thank you for the kindness. The ink trailed off, the final words unwritten, yet the sentiment hung heavy in the air for the researchers who read it decades later, their own eyes blurring with unshed tears. The diary ended there, leaving the ultimate fate of Sarah, Clara, Lily, and any other remaining survivors to the silence of the ice. But the story of their guardians was not yet over. Deeply moved and profoundly intrigued by Sarah's account, the research team decided to set up observation posts to study the area with a new focus. What they discovered was astonishing. A thriving family of bobcats, undoubtedly descendants of Aurora and her kits, still inhabited the region. And these bobcats exhibited behaviors that were, to put it mildly, unusual. They frequented the crash site, not in a scavenging way, but almost as if it were a significant landmark. They followed specific, almost ritualistic paths around the perimeter of the preserved wreckage, paths worn into the tundra over generations. Young kits were often brought to the area, sitting quietly, observing, as if being shown something important. Motion-activated cameras captured footage of the bobcats resting near the fuselage, sometimes leaving small prey nearby for a short while before retrieving it, a ghostly echo of the offerings described in Sarah's diary. There was no scientific explanation for this targeted, almost reverent behavior passed down through generations of wild animals. It was as if the memory of the humans and the strange pact formed in that desperate winter had become part of their lineage, an inherited instinct, a territorial marker imbued with a significance beyond mere survival. They were still, in their own wild way, keeping watch. The story of Flight AE-17 and the Alaskan bobcats rippled out from the research papers and news reports, capturing the hearts and imaginations of people worldwide. It became more than just a tale of a tragic accident. It transformed into a legend of hope, a poignant symbol of the profound and often inexplicable bonds that can exist between humans and the natural world. It spoke of a deep compassion that transcended the boundaries of species, a kindness that endured through the silence of decades and the harshness of the wild. The image of those bobcats, generation after generation, continuing their silent vigil around the frozen wreckage, served as a powerful reminder that even in the face of immense tragedy, acts of unexpected grace can occur, leaving an indelible mark not just on human memory, but perhaps, in some mysterious way, on the wild heart of the world itself. The whispers in the ice were no longer just of sorrow, but of an enduring, inexplicable love. The silent pact forged in the icy grip of despair between human souls and wild hearts reminds us that compassion knows no species, and kindness once given echoes through eternity. If you enjoy the video, like the video and subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video.